Hi friends and welcome back to my channel. It's finally time for me to share my best books of 2022. I'm gonna share my top 10 favorite reads of 2022. We're gonna start at number 10 and then work our way up to the first spot, to my winner, my favorite book of last year. It wasn't that difficult for me to actually set like a top 3 or top 5, but it was a bit more difficult to decide on a top 10, mainly because I've read many strong books throughout the year. I think I had like 16 5 stars, but there's also many 4 stars that I've really enjoyed. I do feel fairly solid about this list of books and about this stack of books that I have in front of me. Without any further ado, let's begin. Number 10 is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I read this back in February for the Olympics-a-thon where I needed to read a translated book. This book is translated from Portuguese, I believe. This is, I would say it's like a modern classic. It was released in '88. So it is a classic, many have heard about it, it's one of the most read books, but it's not like a classic. It's more like a modern-ish classic. I would say, I don't know, what would you define as a classic? Like how old does a book need to be for it to be a classic? Actually, what's interesting is this wasn't my first time reading it, but I do sort of count it as my first time reading it. Because the first time I read it was back in 2021, but I listened to the audiobook and I didn't pay attention at all. And I knew that if I were to read it physically, I would actually be able to appreciate the book so much more, which I definitely did. This is a story about an Andalusian shepherd boy who yearns to travel in search of worldly treasure. I don't remember anything about the book, I realize now. But it's about this young boy who, I guess he gets some sort of message that if he can see the pyramids in Egypt, he will achieve something. That's the worst description ever. Basically, this shepherd boy goes on a journey and he meets a bunch of people along the way. He has a bunch of insightful encounters and realizations. It's a very spiritual book, leaning towards religious book, but I would say more spiritual and like fabulism, fantasticalism, all of that. What I enjoyed about this is that it's a very short and quick read, and there's a bunch of like messages that I personally appreciated. So all the tabs I have here, you perhaps can't see it, but those are like moments and or thoughts and quotes I really enjoyed. And at first I gave this book 4 stars or 4.5 stars. I realized that I kept thinking about it and I really did appreciate the book. I definitely think it's a book I will reread, so I did up it to 5 stars, and I do think it deserves a mention on this list. I found some of the events to be quite relatable as well, and I think I just read it at a time where I really appreciated the book, and I can definitely see myself reread it in the future. Many has this as their favorite book, many don't enjoy this at all. It's a very hit or miss, but for me it was a hit, and I'm very glad I actually read this book and gave it another shot because it definitely deserved it. So yeah. Number 9 on this list is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is a book I listened to as an audiobook. I've seen basically everyone have this on their favorite books of the year, and with all due right, because it's an incredible book. This is a memoir by one of the actors from the iCarly show. I personally never watched iCarly, but I saw that everyone was listening to this book and getting all hyped about it. I got FOMO and decided to listen to it, even though I don't really have any relation to that actor and author or the show or anything like that. But still, I did recognize a lot. Just being someone that grew up watching Nickelodeon and Disney Channel and stuff, I could still understand that era of like child actors and stuff. This is a very raw, brutal and honest book about Jeanette McCurdy's very difficult and troublesome and toxic relationship with her mother. Basically how she was forced into being an actor and how their relationship also triggered like eating disorders and other types of self-harm. It's just Jeanette McCurdy in some ways taking her power back, I feel like, by telling this story. I would not recommend this to everyone because it definitely is a triggering book, especially if you might have toxic relationship with your family or have struggled with eating disorders or self-harm or body dysmorphia or anything like that, really. So I would definitely look into that a bit more if you have considered reading this book, and like just check one extra time with yourself if you would be okay with reading this one. But it is an incredible memoir. She's not holding back, which I personally appreciated. And I had to mention this book because it was such a talked about book in 2022, and that is so well deserved. Number 8 on this list is probably one of my biggest surprises of the year. That book is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I also read this back in February. I did not expect to enjoy this book as much as I did. I adored it, I loved it, I read it in 2 days. It was everything I wanted it to be. I personally really enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the development of their relationship. My one complaint would be that there were not enough spicy scenes. That's honestly all I could complain about. I thought this was so entertaining, so much fun, and it just made me smile. Yes, it was very cliche, it was very cheesy, it was very typical rom-com type of book. I thought this could be perhaps a 4-star, because I am weak for the fake dating trope and all of that. But I did not expect this to be a 5-star. I haven't had the best luck with Ali Hazelwood since, but this first book of hers, incredible. If you don't know, if you missed the hype back in 2021, this is about Olive and Adam, and basically Olive and Adam works at the same lab, so we have like female characters in STEM as well, which I love. Adam is her professor or something like that, and for various reasons they start a fake relationship. It turns out that obviously there are feelings involved and stuff like that, and it's just really cute and fun, and I enjoyed this so much. Number 7 on the list is actually another book I read in February. Seems like February was quite a solid reading month for me when I look at the books I read. Number 7 is XOXO by XOXO. I do own this book, but I have borrowed it to my friend, so I can't show it to you, but it's here. This is another book I read for my romance reading vlog. The same vlog where I read The Love Hypothesis. It's a YA romance. It's about this Korean girl who lives in USA, and one evening she meets this Korean boy, and they really hit it off and like become friends and like start to flirt a bit. But then he needs to go to Korea, and like half a year later or so, she gets an opportunity to go to Korea as well. She plays the cello, so she goes to this like music type of school. And at the school, she meets him again and learns that he's actually a K-pop star. It's about him and her at the school with all their classmates at this musical talent sort of school, and them trying to have a relationship. And it's so cute, it's so adorable. It doesn't really fall into any of those traps that I feel like a YA romance might do. And it felt very mature in some ways for being a YA. Like I felt like the characters were speaking to each other. There weren't really that many misunderstandings. They were very mature in their decisions and how they handled things, which I definitely appreciated. It was also like insanely cute. It made me smile like a freaking goof, and I have not seen enough hype for this book. So this is your reminder to read XOXO, because it is that adorable and beautiful and such a great and quick and lovely read. It truly is. Book number 6 on this list is And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer. This is a book by my favorite author, Fredrik Backman, and it's a very short book, novella. It's a very short story, 90 pages long, about this boy and his grandfather, and they are basically sitting on a bench, and the grandfather is trying to explain how, due to reasons, he's starting to lose his memories, how he's getting older, how he might not always be there. It's a very short and quick read, but it's so impactful. There are once again so many lovely quotes in this one about just getting older, about reflecting on your life and stuff like that. It's a very sad story. People basically make vlogs where they cry to this book. It's also just a beautiful book. And as we know, Fredrik Backman is my favorite author. I'm still working on reading all of his bibliography. I don't want to read the quotes, they're gonna make me cry. This is definitely a book to read, to appreciate life a bit more, I feel like. And I need to mention, I'm actually today going to an event where they will be showing the new A Man Called Otto movie, which is based on A Man Called Ove, which is the book written by Fredrik Backman. And in that event, there will actually be like an author thing before. So we're going to see the movie, but before the movie is shown, the author will actually be there and like talk a bit about the movie and the book and stuff. And I'm so excited about this because, as I said, Fredrik Backman is my favorite author, and like, I can't wait. It's gonna be a great day. I'm very excited about this. It's gonna be awesome. Let's continue. Number 5 on this list is The Rage of Dragons by Evan Winter. This was my first read of 2022. I mentioned this in my award show video, but basically this became the benchmark that I compared the rest of the fantasies I read to throughout the year. It's a debut novel by Evan Winter. It's the first book in an adult epic fantasy series. It's about this world where basically all the men sort of train to become soldiers, and then there are females that are able to control dragons. And it's a very feminist society, I would say. Like, there's a queen, you take the name of the woman when you marry, stuff like that. Basically, this is a revenge story. In this book, we are following Tao. All he wants is just to live a happy life with the woman he loves. That's all he wants to do. But something happened that makes him change his plans, and instead he wants to get revenge on certain people by becoming the best soldier ever. That's his goal. And Tao is so insanely focused on this goal, he's so driven by it, he doesn't see anything else other than the fact that he needs to learn how to fight and become the best in order to get his revenge. He has a very narrow mindset, and that sort of itself brings a lot of consequences, but it's also just a very interesting world with how the magic system works and like with the dragons and so on. There's so much I enjoyed about this book. I really liked the characters, I really liked Tao and his character development, and I really enjoy the world. This book is like 80 or 90% battle scenes, I would say. It's a lot of fighting, a lot of sword fighting and stuff like that. So if that's not your thing, perhaps you might have a more difficult time with this one. It's personally not my thing as well, but I could get past that. It's very battle heavy, but there's like so much in the background of what's going on that it still makes it worth it. I'm super excited about reading the sequel though, because I feel like the world is opening up. We're getting more into the political and strategical sort of storyline. I thoroughly enjoyed this as well. It was a great first read of the year, and once again, as I said, the benchmark for the rest of the fantasy I read. I adored this book. I thought it was incredible. I started the year with giving it 4 stars, but since I kept thinking about this book, I had to up it to 5 stars, because by the end of the year I realized that this was my favorite fantasy of the year and one of my top 5 books of the year. So obviously it deserves a spot on this list, and I can't recommend this book enough. Please read it if you're interested in epic fantasies, battling fantasies, military fantasies, dragons, anything like that. It's worth the hype, it's worth the read, and I need this book in the series to get more love than it's getting. Number 4 on this list is A Song for the Wild Build by Becky Chambers. Another very unexpected book for me. When I first heard about this book, I was not interested in reading it. It happened that I listened to the audiobook based on like randomness or a slump, and I adored it. It was so cute. It's another one of those books where I first gave it 4 stars, but as the year went on, I realized I kept thinking about this book, so I upped it to 5 stars. This story follows a monk and a robot, because the series is called A Monk and a Robot. It's been centuries since the robots of Panga gained self-awareness and laid down their tools. Centuries since they wandered into the wilderness, never to be seen again. Centuries since they faded into myth and urban legend. One day, the life of a tea monk is upended by the arrival of a robot, there to honor the old promise of checking in. The robot has one question: what do people need? Basically, the robot shows up asking the monk, what do humans need? Obviously, the human's like, well, I have no clue. We need to ask around, it's very different. So they go on this little adventure together, trying to find the answer to that question. First of all, we have great representation in the book. The monk is non-binary, the robot is a robot. They sort of form this friendship and all, and it's so adorable. Once again, a lot of great messages. It's a very feel-good book. It's not a dystopia, it's more like a utopia. It's a futuristic book, or it takes place in the future. It's a sci-fi, but it's very hopeful, which I personally appreciate, because I feel like a lot of sci-fi books that take place in the future are very negative or are dystopias. The monk Dex, they have their own struggles with like depression and feeling like they are not enough and so on. And then we have the robot who's really just simplifying everything. Like, why make things so difficult? It's a difficult book to explain in many ways, but it's so worth it. Once again, really short. It's incredible. Number 3 on this list is A Prayer for the Crowned Shy by Becky Chambers, and this is actually the sequel to the book I just talked about. I was so hyped after reading A Song for the Wild Build, so once I saw that a new book had been released, I instantly listened to that one as well. And because I was already that engaged with the characters and the world, and I knew I already appreciated that, the second book was actually an instant 5 star for me. As I said, the first one took its time, it needed to bubble a bit, I needed to think about it, But the second book was just insta-love for me, instant 5 stars. We're basically is continuing with these characters' adventures. It's so heartwarming, it's so heartfelt, it's so relatable, and I cannot recommend this series enough. Both as an audiobook, I'm very excited to read physically at some point as well. It's definitely some books I think I would love to reread. Don't have that much more to say about the sequel other than the fact that it's incredible. This entire series is incredible and please read it. Second place on this list is a book I have borrowed to my friend. So once again, I cannot physically show it. But that book is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. We have a romance in the top 3. That is cool. I read this during the summer. I feel like I read this book during the perfect time. I adore this book. I missed the hype when it was first released. But like now? Basically, The Spanish Love Deception is once again a fake dating romance. We have 2 characters, I don't remember the name. They work at the same company. They don't like each other, but somehow the girl convinces the guy to fake being her fiancé because they're going to a wedding in Spain. Something like that, right? Was it her ex that was getting engaged or something? I don't quite remember. There's so much I enjoyed about this book. I've seen a lot of criticisms towards this book about the characters being immature, about them having a bunch of weird misunderstandings. I definitely did not experience that when I was reading the book. I felt like the characters were quite mature. I don't know if that says more about me than the book. I really like the characters. I really like the main character as well. I personally adored their banter at first. That was a lot of fun. But I also really loved their chemistry. Like the smutty scenes in this book were so good. Like they were so good. The romance and the characters and the setting, and like it's a long book, which was great. It's over 400 pages, but like I loved every minute of reading this book. There were moments when I had to put the book aside because I was just feeling way too much. Another book I could probably reread. I don't remember much about this book other than the fact that I had a freaking good time reading this. And now we're getting to number 1 on my list. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, especially if you've either seen my book awards video or if you just know me. My favorite book and best book of 2022 goes to The Winners by Fredrik Backman. This book destroyed me. It hurt me. It pained me. It almost killed me. This book is the 3rd book in the Beartown series by Fredrik Backman. It was released in Swedish back in 2021, but it was first released in English in 2022 because it needed to be translated. So I had purchased this back in 2021. I had started it. I had read about 200 pages, I think, but then I never picked it up again. And it's a chunky one. It's 700 pages. So I continued reading this in like April or May, I think, and I was instantly hooked again. I couldn't believe that I had ever been able to put this book aside. Because how? Because the moment I started reading it again, I was just like, I needed to know what was gonna happen. And don't you just love when you get that feeling with a book? You keep thinking about the book. When you're not reading the book, you think about the book. And like all you want to do is just get home so you can continue to read your book. I experienced that with this book. There's not much I can say about this book because it's the 3rd and final book of the series. But basically, Beartown is this little town in northern parts of Sweden where they are obsessed with hockey. We're following a like junior league hockey team and some other characters, the sports chief of the team and like his daughter and her best friend, and like there's so many characters. One of my favorite things that Backman does is that he's so great at writing huge casts and having like an ensemble of characters and making every single one of them seem so important. That's definitely the case with this one. New characters are always being introduced, but they always feel equally as important as any other character, no matter if they're in the book for like a chapter or a page or the entirety of the book, and everything feels very intentional. He has a very special way of writing that I adore as well. He can make me laugh and then cry and then laugh again within one single page because it's all so true and relatable. Like, you know these people, you know these characters, you can recognize so many things in these characters from people you met in your own life. There's been a lot of events throughout this last year, and this story, this final book, sort of wraps that up. It takes place 2 years after the events of the first book. I cried my eyes out when I finished this book. I cried because it was sad, but also because I was finishing the series and it was the end of an era. And I feel like when you cry because a series is over, that's like the greatest sign of all. Here's the little blur back here is basically sadness in their hearts, violence in the air. This is where the story about the hockey town and the people ends. You should know by now that if I ever read a Fredrik Backman book in a year, that's gonna be my favorite book of the year. It's been that way 2 years in a row now. We'll see how it goes with this third year. And as I said, I'm seeing him today, which is so epic. That was my top 10 of 2022. It took me a while to figure out this list, but once I had it set, looking at it now, I feel very content with how it looks like. I feel like it says a lot about my reading year. Many of these books were unexpected for me. They were not my typical reads, like, yeah, sure, we have Fredrik Backman, sure, we have Fake Dating, but like, I never thought I would appreciate the Becky Chambers books as much as I did. At the start of the year when I read Rage of Dragons, I did not expect that one to end up as high on this list as it did. Love Hypothesis definitely threw me a curveball. We have a memoir on here. We have The Alchemist, like what? I really started to read more out of my comfort zone, and I feel like that really paid off. Although one interesting thing is that I think most of these books I read at the first half of the year, so I don't know what that says about me in my second half of the year, but yeah. I'm very excited to continue reading books now in 2023 and figure out what my top 10 of this year will be. Please feel free to share if you read any of these books and what you thought of them, or share your favorite book of 2022. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed. Please take care, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye!
You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what